Hello YouTube, here's my video after much anticipation. I've been very busy, which I know you guys don't care because I don't think anybody is really sitting at their computer desk refreshing my page and waiting for my monthly upload. I couldn't upload in August because I was super busy, and also I started watching Cobra Kai. It ate up a lot of my time. Basically how I'm gonna do this is I'm going to combine my July video and my August video into one big video, kind of like how I did my January and February ones. I was wanting to upload both videos in one day, but I don't get enough views for that, so I'm just gonna combine them into one big video. I will be recording this as if it is its own separate video, but I will be splicing them together. Alright, whatever. Let's just get into the video. I watched this movie because I saw the final shot on a video one time and it genuinely unsettled me. I totally forgot about it until I went to the haunted house on July 6th for my summerween and saw a poster for it signed by the actress who played Angela. I genuinely didn't know what this movie was about, so I was totally blind to what I was going to experience. I really enjoyed it at first because I liked the whole concept of an 80s horror movie set in a camp. I don't know how many of those there actually are, but after I finished Steven Universe and saw that Sadie and Ronaldo had a bunch of horror VHS tapes, it made me want to start watching some. The final shot to this movie was in fact extremely terrifying, but it just made no sense. This is the gayest movie I've ever seen. So many boys in booty shorts and crop tops, a gay sex scene, and a literal transgender. Just to clarify, I am not homophobic, but I was just caught off guard by it considering it wasn't so normalized back then as it is now. Moral of the story, I really enjoyed this movie up until the final minute of it. It just made no sense at all and didn't clarify anything. It was just insanely funny to me. Considering it looks like it was made with a small budget, I have to give credit where it's due. It had terrible acting, a story that made no sense, and some really bad death scenes. Later in the day after I watched it, I had to take back everything I said because it just made perfect sense. After rethinking the movie, I thought it was actually genius, and my opinion changed on it a lot. It was such a random yet brave and bold ending, and I can't believe they chose to go with that. I think after I finished the movie, I couldn't stop thinking about it for like another week. I don't know, the ending just kind of stuck with me. Peak f***ing cinema. This was incredible. I cannot believe Ty West managed to create a trilogy where each movie is so extremely different. This movie was all too similar to Tarantino's 9th film, which is also what I said about X. I honestly think it was better than Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and X, and Pearl. Okay, I don't know why I said that in my script. I think Pearl was like 1,000 times better. Anyways, this was great. As a feature film director and a current soon-to-be freshman in film school, a movie about making movies and wanting to make it big is just so brilliant. Especially with the twist of making it a murder mystery. MaXXXine was the long-awaited third installment to the A24 Ty West trilogy, and it was awesome. I was super excited to see this one and was following it as the rollout and promotion was happening, so I'm glad that it finally came. I love low-budget movies. I don't know why I watched this, to be honest. Alright, I didn't write much for my script, so I'm just gonna say this at the top of my head. I just remember people were talking about it when it came out, and then a lot of people were talking about the second one when it came out. I've never seen any clips of it, I've just kind of seen people talk about it. I saw that it was on a streaming platform that I use, so I ended up watching it, and I thought it was alright. Oh my god, this was so damn boring. It was so troubling to get through. The prom scene was the only interesting highlight. Anytime somebody talks about Carrie, the only thing they can remember is the prom scene. Even then, it was extremely dragged out. Like, come on, the entire scene, I was just telling them, just pull the bucket. Like, it wasn't even suspenseful. The payoff wasn't even worth it. I expected a brutal bloodbath, and all I got was a couple guys getting splashed with the hose. I expected a lot more from this movie since it's considered a horror classic, but I wasn't a fan of it. He is the Chainsaw Man. Psychotic ass family. It just reminds me of Resident Evil 7. This movie also kind of sucked, but it was pretty terrifying. Terrifying in the way that it would be absolutely insane to be stuck in this situation. But the movie wasn't scary or anything. I do find it interesting that Leatherface can run so damn fast. Usually in slasher movies, the killer is super slow and the victims always have a chance to run away. but this dude is actually sprinting at the girl. I feel like I might have liked this movie if I was living in the generation that it came out in, but today it just doesn't really live up to the movies we have, so that's why I did not really enjoy it. Usually I can appreciate an old movie if it is actually interesting, but this one just wasn't for me. I like the whole concept and the vibe to it, but actually watching it just wasn't that interesting. Holy shit, I did not realize that I had such a long I thought my review for this was only a couple sentences, but this is like a whole damn paragraph. Alright. Well, this ruined my summer-ween streak. Let me start off by saying I do not like Illumination movies. I think this many movies is genuinely unnecessary. I think after 3 it was more than enough, and now there's 6 of these. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the animation. I think they're one of the best in the game. With all the expressiveness and details and attention to the background characters, it's all very impressive. But these are genuinely for kids. Like, this is an actual movie made for children. There's nothing to take away from it. I want to compare it to movies like Spider-Verse or Rango. Those are some of my favorite kids movies, and there's so much you can take from it. I'm not going to pretend like I've seen all the movies in the series, because I've only seen about half of them, but I actually did enjoy Minions. So it was really cool to see Scarlet Overkill in the ending. It was super cool to see her and Vector, but that was the only highlight. Also, why do the kids call Gru by his name, but they don't call Lucy by her name? They just call her Mom. Anyways, I think a super cool idea for a next Illumination movie would be a genuine superhero movie. Not about the mega minions. All the movies have been about villains. I just want to see Illumination make a movie that's just heroes. That doesn't include Minions or Gru. Just make it in the same universe. But I just want them to stop milking the minions and just come up with some original ideas. It's really hard to make a short film that people are gonna like. You just have to give the critics what they want. I've heard so much talk about this being a great short film, but it really just feels like it was made for the critics and not for the people. The production on this is impressive, and the actors did a great job at what they do, but it just felt rushed, probably because it was a short film, but it was just so much crammed in it, and I can't blame the director because, like I said, it's very difficult to make a short film. But it seems like every time I watch a short film, it's just always a coming of age thing, and I wish they weren't all like that. I had been dying to watch this movie for years. This was the very first Studio Ghibli movie that I ever wanted to watch, and I never did up until now in theaters. This movie started off great, but had a very slow end. As you can tell from most of my reviews, I really dislike a movie that gets dragged on for no reason at all. I loved this movie, and it was a lot darker than I expected, but it just wasn't perfect in my opinion, only because it was missing so much for me. Don't get me wrong, I think this is one of my favorite Ghibli movies yet, but with so much anticipation, I was expecting so much more. I plan to rewatch it in English dub, and hopefully I will enjoy it more. I'm gonna give it 4 stars, which I think is good. It was a great movie, the action, the animation, the story, it was all great. This was fantastic. I have definitely got to start watching more of these early 2000 movies. I just love the whole idea of 2 stories happening at once. This was a great movie. Totally one of those movies I can just put on at any time and rewatch. I'm sure a lot of people have watched this movie, so I'm not gonna go ahead and recommend it, but I mean, if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it just because it's a cult classic. Okay, I haven't read this review since I wrote it, but I just know that I'm glazing it a lot, so get ready. I really don't even know where to start. The MCU is so back. I still remember the minute I saw the announcement that Hugh Jackman would be coming back as Wolverine. I was in absolute shock. For those who don't know, my name is Xavier. My brother is named Logan. We were both named after the X-Men. My dad has always been a huge fan of the X-Men movies, and the night that we watched it, we all watched it together. I don't care what people think or what they have to say about this movie. To me, it was perfect. At the time that the movie Logan released, it felt like such a satisfying ending to Hugh Jackman's character, literally burying it and concluding Wolverine's legacy. Now, as satisfying and relieving as that was, this was also just as satisfying. I had felt that since the moment it was announced, that this would be amazing. I'm not at all mad that they brought back Jackman as Wolverine. From the start, I had absolute faith in Marvel that they would not this up. Marvel knew exactly what they were doing with this movie, with all the jabs at how terrible the new phase is. This was my most anticipated movie of the year. Usually I would say one of the most anticipated, but this was the most anticipated. I had extremely high hopes, and I've got to say Marvel blew me away, especially knowing the fact that this was the only Marvel movie to be released in 2024. The stakes were extremely high. The fate of the MCU's future was all in the hands of this movie, and now people have faith in these movies again. This was all for the fans, so thank you to everyone who worked on this movie. It really meant a lot to me. I first saw the trailer for this when I watched Iron Claw, and me and my dad were extremely interested right off the bat. Every weekend that it was out in theaters, we talked about going to watch it, but never did. Thankfully, it recently got added to HBO Max, so we watched it on July 28th. It's not at all what we expected from the movie, but it was just weird enough to classify as an A24 movie. We both enjoyed it, but for me, it wasn't really all that. I'm glad we finally watched it, but I don't think I'd ever watch it again. It actually just made me super uneasy. All the use of steroids just made me feel icky. The movie does a good job at portraying a drug trip. I've never had one, I've never been on steroids, but I mean, every time I think about it, it's just something like this. Lots of sweaty, horny, and aggravating feelings. I wanted to come into this movie completely blind. I'm glad I did, because I had no clue what I was walking into, other than the fact that it was a horror and crime movie with an unseen Nicolas Cage. It started off extremely strong. The opening scene had me hooked. I really started to lose interest after Longlegs was shown. I feel like that was the whole mystery of the movie, and the hype died down when it showed his silly side. Another thing that I wasn't a fan of was the looseness of the phrase, I don't even want to say it, I am a Christian and I hate when movies use the Antichrist as a cheap excuse for an evil antagonist. I don't like that A24 has been doing it recently, so it wasn't cool when Neon did it. The whole thing with dolls also wasn't very interesting to me. In conclusion, I really enjoyed the whole thing with the protagonist being a victim to Longlegs' crimes and becoming an FBI agent to track him down. The whole mystery and puzzle solving was awesome, but like I said, during the second act is when it really started to fall off. The lead actress did an amazing job, and that's really all I have to say. I was wanting to watch this movie opening weekend just because I'd heard lots of talk about it before its release, but I barely got to it like a month after its release. Also, I went on a cheap ticket Tuesday, and luckily my dad wanted to come, otherwise this would have been a trip to the movies alone, and that probably would have been weird. Alright, so we have finally reached the end of the July reviews. Here's my rankings for them. And here's what I watched in August. This movie was actually a lot better than I thought. A simple and short story that was done pretty damn good. Likeable characters and a satisfying ending. What more could you want? Side note, I can't even remember the last time I went to the movies with my mom. She's not a big movie person, and I think the last movie we watched was honestly Doctor Strange. For some reason, she enjoys storms, so she was kind of excited to go watch this one. Another fun fact, we were actually going to go watch it on the last day of July, but there was a big storm that knocked out all the power in our city, so we ended up watching it on August 1st. Wow, this movie was so fun. The animation was actually amazing. And this is actually the first time I've noticed so many creative sound effects inside of a movie. Definitely now one of my favorite Ghibli movies. I know I say it all the time after I watch a Ghibli movie, but this one was just so cute and simple. I really, really liked it. There was more explosions in this movie than there are in Bikini Bottom. As someone who is a fan of the game, I really loved how accurate the characters were in terms of dialogue and costume design. I tried really hard to like this movie. It really just feels like they told an AI generation to write a script for a Borderlands movie, and they just went with that. I was honestly so eager for this movie to be over. The games are known for their quirkiness and violence, but it was like 90% quirky and 10% violent. Like I said, I tried really hard to like this movie. As I have played all the games, I was kind of excited when I heard they were coming out with a Borderlands movie. And I don't like to listen to reviews, I usually like to form my own opinion, but for this one, I can pretty much agree with what everyone has to say. It's been such a long time since I've seen this movie. I used to have it on DVD, so it would play all the time in my house. It's not as funny as I remember it being, but I still found it pretty enjoyable. I still hold the hope that they make a third one. How is this review longer than any of the ones I've done for August? This is insane. Alright, I think this is my third time attempting to watch it, and every time that I've tried watching it so far, I can never pay attention to the screen. Technically, I've never watched this movie fully. Even this time, there were scenes that I totally did not pay attention to. This is just a terrible concept for a film, and as time goes on, the more terribly it will age. The story is extremely lazy, and it just makes zero sense to why things work the way they do. I know this is a kid's movie, but damn, it's just terrible. This is even some of the worst character designs and some of the worst character writing. It has extremely outdated jokes and songs. It just wouldn't make sense to somebody watching it later in the future. This movie was terrible when it came out, and it's still terrible now.
I mean, it's alright.
I was super excited to see why there was so much hype around this movie, and honestly, it just wasn't as great as I hoped it would be. I liked the action scenes, but it was just a whole lot of scenes that were meant to have me feeling suspensed, but it just honestly left me feeling bored. I really wanted to like it because I've heard so many people talk about this movie for many years, but I don't know, I just didn't like it all that much. This is an absolute masterpiece and a beautifully well done stop motion animated film. I used to own this movie on DVD and would watch it all the time. I saw it back when it first released in 2008, and ever since then it's always held an extremely super special spot in my heart. This movie really means a lot to me, and there's so much to take from it. I'm so glad I got to see it in theaters, and especially grateful it was in 3D. My copy of the DVD came with 3D glasses, so I would always watch it in 3D. Rewatching it now, it felt like this movie was meant to be watched in 3D. There's so many scenes that really just pop out at you. It makes me sad to think how I will never be able to experience this again in theaters. Go watch Coraline if you've never seen it. It's a must watch for everyone, unless you're super young, because this movie terrified me when I was younger. I feel like I watched this movie at the perfect time. I was really struggling with writing, and this movie gave me the spark that I needed to get out of my writer's block. With the remake coming out, my dad decided it was perfect to watch this movie. He's always talked about it before, but for the past couple months since the announcement of the remake, he's been talking about it a lot, saying how much he loves it. And while we were watching it, he couldn't stop talking about how cool each scene was. It's like he had something to talk about for every little moment. He even told me that this is probably in his top 5 favorite movies, so for that, I gotta give it some respect. Now, what did I think of the movie? I think some scenes could have been better. I think it could have used better cinematography, but other than that, it had a very good story, super cool fight scenes, and an awesome character design. This is definitely a timeless movie, and I can see why my dad likes it so much. Alright, just get ready for some glazing. If you've seen this movie, I just have to ask you this. When did you realize you were watching the greatest movie of the year? I had walked out of the movie theater incredibly shocked to my core. This was incredible. I just knew it would be. After I had seen the very first trailer, I was extremely interested. This movie was obviously the reason I had watched the first Alien movie, and I have never seen a single Alien movie until I watched the first one very recently. I'm glad that the first one didn't kill any hype for me, because this one was just far greater than the first one. I don't even think you need to watch the other Alien movies to enjoy this one, because I absolutely loved it. I think there's like 6 of them, and I've only seen the first one. That's besides the point. This movie had everything I look for in a movie. A story that makes sense with characters interesting enough to where you can feel something towards them. A cast so small that it's not overwhelming trying to remember faces. I even sat for the credits just to see the entire cast, and it only had like 10 people. And I love a location just perfect enough to where the entire movie can be spent just right there. Which is why I love Reservoir Dogs and The Hateful Eight so much, because it does that perfectly. The music and sound effects were perfect too. Amazing use on each one of them. Best of all, I love a movie that isn't afraid to kill some characters. A movie where plot armor simply does not exist, and the writers aren't afraid to make it terrifyingly brutal. I absolutely loved it, and it made so much sense. This was just a brilliant movie and easily one of my new favorites, which I can't say for a lot of movies. It had a perfect amount of suspense and kept me hooked the entire time. Every suspenseful scene was perfectly written. I just can't really explain it. They gave a perfect situation and came up with genius solutions. It seemed like it used every bit of information and lore that was given in the other movies and used it to the best of its abilities. Obviously, incredible performance by Kaylee Spaney. she has quickly become one of my favorites. Also, every frame in this movie was just beautiful. Huge credit to the team behind the cinematography because I really had so many favorite shots. Another thing I want to say before I wrap this up is every time I watch a movie where the protagonist is about to die, me as the audience never believes it. Like, I know they're not gonna die. So sometimes it just gets kind of annoying when characters are put in situations that we all know they're making it out of. But for once, I genuinely believed it was the end for everyone. I think that just perfectly explains why the aliens were terrifyingly written. I had no hope for the protagonist because the alien just seemed that deadly. I'll say it again. This movie was perfect, and I think it is the best movie to be released this year in 2024. I hate how some people review movies sometimes. Can people just form their own genuine opinion on movies without having to follow what other people say? Sure, it was a disrespect to the original movie, but just look at it as a standalone movie. Even diehard fans of the original think it's not as good as the first. Of course it's not going to be. So many people should have came into this movie expecting something different. It's a take on the original story, made different from the ground up. In my opinion, it was a great movie. Just wasn't a good Crow movie. If it had been titled something else, people would have ate it up. People need to start treating every movie as a standalone one instead of disliking it just because it's a spin-off or a sequel or a remake. Just enjoy a movie. And those were all the reviews for August. Now here's how I ranked them. Alright, you have finally reached the end of the video. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. If you guys aren't yet subscribed, go ahead and do so now. A like would also be very much appreciated. And once again, I do apologize that this video took so long to come out. It's taken lots of planning and recording and editing, and this was my biggest video yet. So liking and subscribing would be a ton of help to get this video to blow up. Comment down below what movies you want me to watch next. I've never promoted my letterbox, but go ahead and follow me on there if you want up-to-date reviews on the movies that I watch. I upload my reviews the day that I watch the movie, so you don't have to wait for my YouTube video. That's about all for now. See you guys next month in October.